Alright guys, today we are talking wheel spacers. I made a community post a few days ago where I posted a picture of these. These are from Bulletproof Off-Road Adapters or motorsporttech.com. These are hub-centric wheel spacers. Now let's talk a little bit about wheel spacers in general. There's a couple different types of wheel spacers. You can get some of the thinner wheel spacers that are just half inch or less, and really they just slide on over your lug studs and they don't have their own set of studs to hold your wheel on. I don't really recommend those just because you're going to just reduce the amount of thread engagement on your lug nuts when you just sandwich a spacer behind your rim and use the same studs already on your axle. I will go ahead and say too, I don't have any direct experience with wheel spacers. This is just based on what I've been reading and what I decided to go to. Now, you can get hub-centric or lug-centric wheel spacers. I almost went with some cheaper ones off of Amazon. They get a kind of mixed review. Some people install them and have no problem. Some people complain about them. So, with the cheaper ones on Amazon, they're going to be lug-centric, which means that this center bore right here is going to be generically larger size, so it can slip over, the axle hub of many different types of applications. And they just have holes that match up with the lug pattern, and they got their own set of studs in there. The other thing you got to consider is the thickness. This is a 1-inch thick wheel spacer, and you got to make sure that they are thick enough so that the studs on the existing axle don't stick through the other side. I'll show you what I mean. When you take off these low profile lug nuts and you put them on there, you got to make sure that it's not sticking out beyond the surface, because that's where your rim is going to mount to. Now this is a pretty large chunk of material. This is a heavy mass, and it's going to be rotating right up there with your rim and your tire, right? You got to balance your tires, you got to balance them to your rim to make sure that you don't get any crazy vibrations. That's the other thing. When the center hub is generically large to fit on a bunch of different vehicles, you're relying on the positioning of the taper cone on the end of the lug nuts and the taper seat surface inside the actual spacer, and it's centering itself based on where the lug studs are. That in and of itself really shouldn't be too much of a problem. But the flip side of that is going to be these type of spacers, which are hub-centric. These are custom machined to order, so it took about 4 or 5 weeks for me to get them, which is a little bit of a long wait, but it is, the COVID-19 type environment that manufacturers are working in right now. So these are custom machined. You can get them any thickness you want, so you can get 1 inch, 2 inch, whatever, half inch. And the center bore here is perfectly designed to match kind of the outer ring of the hub right here. And it also has a lip on it right here, which is going to help center your rim. And so what you get is, instead of just relying on the lug nuts to hold everything centered and run well and balanced, you basically have a really strong bolted joint, because you have the spacer itself being supported on the inside of the ring, the outside of this hub, and then you have this ring going on the inside of your center bore on the rim. And then once you torque all of these down, you should have a really strong bolted joint that is going to be perfectly centered on the hub and not cause any issues. Now these are 1-inch wheel spacers, and I'm going to run them on the rear wheels only. And the reason for that was because of with the larger tires, 33, 12.5, 15 on the stock backspace rim, so that's a 15x7 with 5.5-inch backspace. The wider tire starts to rub a little bit. Most of it's up here, but it was getting close to the flange right here. I'll show you what I mean. The flange next to this bump stop actually sticks out. And that was just a little too close for comfort given the amount of sidewall bulge on a 12.5-inch wide tire. So with wheel spacers like these that are going to be custom machined to order, they are more expensive. This was $130 just for 2. And in hindsight, if I'm going to get, say, all 4 tires, and spend almost $300, I might as well have just bought new rims with the correct back spacing. But you live and you learn, right? So this is 1-inch wheel spacer, so that'll make the 5.5 backspace down to 4.5 backspace. That being said, once I torque these properly and put them on, it shouldn't really have much downside other than the fact that you have more bolted joints that you have to undo to get to servicing. So I'm going to go ahead and take this as an opportunity to go ahead and remove the brake drums and replace the brake shoes and springs, just so that I know that I'm not going to have to take it off for a while. So before I put the drum on, this is just a good visual for a hub-centric wheel spacer. That inner bore is perfectly sized to go around the outer bore of that flange. So if I just slide it on, you can see that it is actually using this inner surface as the centering feature,
And of course, you also have, by measurement and by the way it's designed, the lugs are also centered all in that same point. But this becomes part of the structure. And then you also have this outer ring that goes on the inside bore of the rim. So when you bolt everything together nice and tight, you get a very secure bolted joint. So because this is a critical bolted joint, I wanted to make sure that I got the correct torque. The torque wrench that I have actually only goes up to 80 foot-pounds. So this will turn into a little brief review. EP Auto, which is a brand on Amazon, is actually the same brand of the other torque wrench that I have. I just got the next size up. This is a 1/2-inch drive. Goes up to 150 foot-pounds. Comes in a nice blow molded case there. Nice thing is it does come with a 3/8 adapter, because in 1/2-inch drive all I really have is impact sockets. You can't fit impact sockets in the hole here, so you got to use a regular socket. So this is the wrench that I'm going with. I'm going to go in a star pattern, so I'll do here and then switch, whatever. Any type of bolt ring, you want to go in a star pattern so that you don't get it wedged or out of center. Now for a wheel spacer on the rear axle, my vehicle's on 3 out of 4 tires and the transmission's in park. So even with my tire off the ground here, I should be able to torque it, and I'll just use the transmission to hold it. Or likewise, you could use brakes if you had a friend to sit in the car or reach in and grab the brake pedal. If you do these on the front, you're either going to need to manually engage your 4-wheel drive locking hubs, put the transfer case in 4-wheel drive or something, or find some type of screwdriver or pry bar or whatever to wedge in the brake rotor, or again use the brakes would probably be the better idea, because you're going to have to resist 100 foot-pounds of torque, otherwise you're just going to spin the hub. I'm just going to snug it up until I just feel the slightest amount of tension. Alright, now that they're all relatively snugged up, $100 foot-pounds. Go around the ring one more time. And there you have it. Hub-centric wheel spacer with a lip. Torque to 100 foot-pounds. I'll go drive it a few miles and I'll recheck the torque, but I don't think there's going to be anything needed there. Brakes are good, so I shouldn't have to mess with those for a few more years. And that's the story.
I did want to go ahead and mention that even though I only purchased 2 wheel spacers and I intended on running them on the rear axle only, I did go ahead and do a test fit on the front hub to make sure that they would fit, and also to evaluate tire clearances and how much trimming of the fenders would be needed if I had purchased them for the front as well. However, these spacers did not fit on the front, and the reason is because of the thickness of that ring that your rim centers on. The thickness of that material right there narrows down the inner diameter just enough that it can't clear the 4-wheel drive locking hub on the front end, because it sticks out so much further off of the hub than this flange does on the rear axle. I did follow up with Motorsport Tech, and they confirmed that they have separate designs and separate part numbers for front spacers and rear spacers to alleviate that issue. Because I only ordered 2, and I used the comments box to specify on their website that I was ordering for the rear axle, they sent me the spacer that has a thicker ring for the rim to mount on. If you order a set of 4, they'll automatically give you 2 rears and 2 fronts, and the front spacer is going to be a very similar design, but the thickness of that ring is going to be greatly reduced so that you can actually clear the outer diameter of that four-wheel drive locking hub. Even though I haven't seen the actual front spacers from this company, based on the information I have and my experience with the rear spacers, I have no doubt that they would fit, and I can recommend this product.